Welcome to the American Small Business League podcast. I am Bruce DeTorres, and with me is Stephen Huey, who is running as a Democrat for Congress in Texas' 18th District. Stephen has 20 years' experience in energy, finance, and healthcare. His priorities include his community, the economy and jobs, and the cost of living. And you can learn all about him at Stephen Huey for Congress.com. Stephen is spelled with PH. Thank you very much, Stephen, for joining me this morning. How are you today?
Doing great. I've been up a little longer than you since I'm on Central Time here, but I'm very appreciative of you having me on, and I've been following a little bit of what you've been up to, and I stand behind it 100%.
Oh, that's great. And I'm really looking forward to getting to know you. And as you know, and the first thing I want to ask you all about is you and why you're running. Really take your time to explain that to me thoroughly. I'll interject probably with some questions, and then I'll get everyone up to speed with our particular concerns and get your thoughts about those. So, Stephen Huey, Texas, 18th District. Who are you? Why are you running? What do you want to get done?
Yeah, so I'm right here in the heart of Houston, as I like to call it. And you mentioned a few things from my website, but from what I can tell, I know some people say that stats lie, but or you can make them say whatever you want to say. But from my reading of the charts over the years, I would say over my lifetime, the middle class has fallen behind. There's less purchasing power today. As I mentioned, I would like to use my experience in various industries in the business world to try to do more sensible, pragmatic policies, right? Now, if we're going to have a data-driven approach, which doesn't seem to be in vogue right now, um, that requires more transparency in government than what we've gotten for a long time and what we're getting. Coming from the tech world, I was pretty excited many years ago when, I guess under Obama, there was like a data.gov website. I felt like it was yet another step in the right direction for government. Nowadays, I don't feel like we're seeing that so much. And I know it might be an uphill battle, but it's still something that's always been near and dear to my heart over the years. I've had friends who worked in 18F, which is a new part of the government after the whole healthcare.gov fiasco, right? They brought in some Silicon Valley programmers to kind of fix the mess that was created by dozens of contractors that were all working on healthcare.gov, which, coming from the tech world, you don't need so many cooks in the kitchen. And so 18F was created after that, and they've helped a lot of government agencies. I have friends, I know people, I have a lot of small town relatives and even people here in the big city that don't believe that anything good can happen in government. And I don't think that's true. I think it's sometimes an uphill battle, but if you've been in a large corporation, you know that you have to do the work to move the ball forward, because it's a large organization, a lot of people have to get involved. So again, friends of mine have been working in 18F. It's now gone thanks to Doge. From my mind, the 18F was an organization inside the government that was making it more efficient, modernizing the way it does things. And they essentially got rid of one of the best organizations that was doing that, right? So again, 18F was kind of bringing in modern software development processes and methodologies, smaller teams tackling problems instead of having, again, so many people, right? Now, now my district, right, it has a lot of issues having a wide socioeconomic range here in the big city. And yes, there are a lot of ways in which the district is being hurt right now by major cuts. Um, uh, but I feel like a big problem in government that exacerbates a lot of the issues that my district faces is the power of big money in politics, right? It kind of drowns out the voices of people, doesn't see their needs getting addressed as easily or as much because other interests are getting first dibs, I guess you could say. Um, I even know, people who voted for Trump because they wanted to see the cost of living improve. Like a young woman I know, she really wanted to be able to afford a house for the first time. And I don't feel like some of the policies right now are making it easier for her to afford things, including a house. Um, but I let me take a step back though and tell you a little bit about how I'm a little different from the other candidates, right? Again, I'm the only one who has years and years, decades of experience in healthcare, energy, and finance, right? Solving problems, actual business problems, right? Knowing how to break those down. I'm all about being a voice for the people, speaking truth to power. But with that, I would also be trying to advance pragmatic policies. Okay. So I'm a little different because also while I'm a native Texan, I moved to Nigeria when I was a kid. My parents served as missionaries over there. I got to see a whole new world. It helped me appreciate other people, but also appreciate the country I came from. I mean, America has a lot of advantages that a lot of countries in the world just don't enjoy. And while we should be grateful for the ones we have, it doesn't mean we can't criticize things that could be better, right? Especially when we have so much wealth here, when it's not when it's not being managed as well as it could be, with all of the insight, knowledge, technology we have now. I feel like we should be asking our leaders to do a better job, okay? Because it's possible. So I moved to Nigeria, but then I came back here to go to Rice University. My wife and I both went to Rice in Houston. We're raising our four kids here in the district. Um, and I don't know if I know you're kind of a historian in a way, right? And
Mhm.
so, do you realize that there was a famous speech by JFK at Rice University?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, the famous moon speech. So he asked why some say the moon. There was a clip that usually showed up on TV, which was we choose to do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Now, a lot of people don't realize there were three things he said right before that. Why climb the highest mountain? Why try to cross the Atlantic, which only happened about 3.5 decades before? And then why does Rice play Texas, right? So Texas is a huge school, Rice is a small school. When JFK posed that question, he was trying to rally everyone to do something very hard. And there are a lot of things right now in government and in our nation that are difficult to kind of move the ball forward on, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't do them, right?
Mm.
So I feel like people who, again, give up on anything good happening in government are not having JFK's attitude that he had in that moment, right?
Mhm.
So I feel like we should we should keep trying to you are obviously very focused on some particular goals, and we need to keep those goals in mind at all times.
Mm.
So for me, I feel like a lot of problems in my district aren't being served well, but again, because a lot of people don't realize how much power there is from people who have large amounts of money, right? Organizations or individuals, and how they are getting their needs served or their desires served, and we're not. Like I was explaining to many people, I'm on the campaign trail now, right? As an individual candidate, I'm so severely limited, and depending on the source, I can only receive, $3,500 or $5,000. But then you have these super PACs who can come into my district with, millions, undisclosed donors and millions of dollars, and it's not a level playing field, right? So I feel like if we start rallying the American people to understand we should be asking our representatives to remove those obstacles, those things that get in the way of getting things done. Maybe we can't tackle all the things at once, but it will definitely make the road in front of us a lot smoother
Mm.
than it is right now.
Mhm.
Less of an uphill battle, right?
Mhm.
I imagine you guys might be trying to advance some of your goals and know that it could take a long time, right? But
Mhm.
they could get done faster if we had some of these massive, bits of corruption that are standing in the way. A lot of people I've been talking to, I understand that some of them don't want to hear if both sides are doing fear mongering, right? Some people might be saying about the current administration, well, they're a threat to democracy or something like that, right? And I understand some people don't feel that way. I see where they're coming from. Um, but the reason something like that is on my radar so much is because when I was living in Nigeria, first there was one dictator and he was enriching himself a lot, right? And then there was a particularly bad dictator who imprisoned two. So I had two schoolmates whose fathers were wrongfully imprisoned. And one of them was even executed. And Nigeria was temporarily thrown out of the British Commonwealth as a result of that, right? Now, we may not get that far along. I hope we never do. But I would just say that I would be the first to say, as an American and as a Texan, I want my American leaders and my Texan leaders to be as little corrupt as possible. Because again, that's a source of inefficiency. So if you're going to complain about government inefficiency, let's start with that. um, and then
Yeah.
hopefully we can kind of make progress on everything else. Um, but I'll briefly touch on my career trajectory, right? So I went to Rice. My parents had studied to be teachers. I even thought for many years I might be a teacher. I got within one class of being certified to teach high school in Texas. But I did major in computer science. But at the same time, I took over 20 hours of literature and a bunch of other fun classes. I even thought I might be an English teacher because, that's pretty fun, for me at least. While I have tutored over the years, I never got back to teaching. I thought after paying off my loans a few years, I'll do that. I have a lot of friends that have taught in charter schools and public schools here in Houston. I've visited some of them in their classes. I've worked in large corporations. I was hanging out with some older ex-Enron people when I was at JP Morgan Chase. Very massive organization. Some things move very slowly, but we were working on some cutting edge credit risk technology to prevent another Enron because JP Morgan lost billions of dollars from that catastrophe. But I was there long enough to see another catastrophe that many Americans remember, which was the subprime mortgage meltdown. So for me, it was very insightful to kind of watch that history unfold, right? Now, over the years, I've joined multiple startups. I wasn't ready to kind of settle down in a large corporation and just sit still, kind of have a comfy, cushy job, I really wanted to try to make something new. So pretty much all my projects over the years have been building new solutions from the ground up. I've just preferred that. It's a lot more exciting for me, but it's also required me to do deep dives on each industry. So when I was in a large energy corporation, really it was bringing together a lot of data scientists, geoscientists, and engineers to dream up next generation solutions, right? I was managing three software teams there. They had to kind of ramp up very quickly for this bold new initiative. And again, for me, it was I had to be a quick study on things I had never learned before, right? And all these engineering workflows and how those worked, right? And again, whenever I was in startups, some of them were in healthcare, and I had to learn a whole new world. Obviously, healthcare, you can imagine, there's so many hairy nuances and rabbit trails, and some people find that the most depressing to try to solve or fix, right? But
Mm-hmm.
I would say that our startups were focused, and when we try to tackle problems, very specific problems, we can make incremental change, we can make improvements, and I believe we need to try. In a nutshell, I feel like I'm bringing a lot of knowledge of different industries, which is something that congressmen do have to be a quick study on. We're going and sitting in all these committee meetings, and they may or may not have ever touched on some of these subjects before. And while I don't know everything, I do feel like I'm well prepared for kind of diving deep on whatever I need to.
Your experience there at the end that you described made me picture, wow, that would be a skill set very valuable to a first-time congressman to get up to speed as quickly as possible and then get effective as quickly as possible to actually propose and have an impact. I mean, that's just so many stages of, and you're up many nights just picturing like what will it or could it be like to hit the ground running once you win, which is a whole humongous challenge after just the challenge of navigating a successful campaign. It sounds like, am I right? This is the first public office that you're running for, isn't it?
That's very true.
Okay. If I could, I'd like to describe those issues that we are concerned about and get your thoughts about them. And they do address a lot of the themes and problems that you've alluded to and that you actually described. For instance, how the middle class has been beaten down over the last many, many decades, and it's barely hanging on, and its trajectory, I believe, is a downward spiral, and it's really a crisis. You know, the wealth creation and the wealth extraction up to the tippy top of the tiniest percent of the elite has left this country very, very vulnerable to economic collapse, as I see it, and so do many, many others. Because as rich as we are, it's more and more accumulated up in the hands of a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the very, very rich and powerful. And the vast majority of us are struggling paycheck to paycheck, and it's completely unsustainable. So we need brand new problem solvers like you to get into office, and also to inspire more regular people with the idea that anything that we can do could make a difference. That's because our strength is in our numbers, but too many Americans are just plain flat out feeling powerless. Now, all that said, just so you know how I look at things, I want to just describe the organization I work for, the American Small Business League, and what we reached out to you and told you was, listen, we recommend, Stephen, that you look at this particular issue, get convinced about it, and talk about it on the campaign and see if it resonates with your constituents, which is specifically this. We have a project called Don't Cheat Women, okay, and a website,
Mhm.
don'tcheatwomen.com, no apostrophe, which teaches this. Women are half the population. They own 40% of all businesses. And yet the law says they are entitled to only 5% of all federal contract dollars. And worse, only twice in the last many, many decades has the federal government actually steered about 5% of federal contract dollars to women owned small businesses. That means 95% of the 800 billion procurement budget of the federal government goes to companies owned by men. That is in no way, shape, or form fair. And here's a few of the major problems that that causes. Without economic equality and opportunity, women do not have political equality because men dominate politically, Stephen, because
Mhm.
they simply earn and save more than women. Today, 2025, men hold 75% of seats in Congress, seats in the Senate, all state legislatures, and all cabinet and cabinet positions historically. 75%. They hold almost that many governorships. Okay. And they
Mhm.
hold 90% of committee chair positions and party leadership positions. So they dominate politically, and women have different political values and concerns and issues and priorities that are they don't have that equal political say because they do not have this equivalent economic strength. They're rising in many by many measures in many ways economically compared to men, which is great. But our laser focus is on the federal contracts, and here's why. For decades, we've been exposing the fact that small business contracts are going to big businesses. Billions of dollars every year are diverted to big businesses, and the government is facilitating kind of a lie by saying, oh, we meet the goal. The goal is 23% of all federal contract dollars are supposed to go to small businesses in general. And yet, our 100 and plus legal victories, freedom of information suits against the Pentagon, NASA, the SBA, the GSA, and more have shown that the vast majority of federal contract dollars go to the country's biggest businesses, starving the middle class from the prosperity it would create if that right portion actually went to our legitimate small businesses. So that's what we bang the gong about and try and bring attention to and want to give to you as a candidate on a silver platter because, and I'm wrapping up here, we are a small business nation, okay?
Mhm.
99.9% of all businesses in the United States are a small business by the government's definition of up to 500 employees. We think that's a baloney definition because 98% of all businesses have less than 100. The average business has about 6 to 8 employees in the United States. We are a small business nation and we're not getting the federal contract dollars that the law says that we're supposed to. The 1/10 of 1% of businesses that are big businesses, Stephen, that get the majority of federal contracts, don't create new jobs to perform that work because they're already big businesses. And if small businesses actually got the contracts that they're supposed to, they would create 2.3 million new jobs if they got the 23%. We want to raise from 5% to 15% the amount of contracts going to women owned businesses, which would push the 23% to 33% of contracts going to small businesses in general, which would create 3.3 million new jobs every year, on top of the 2 million jobs that America typically creates. Bottom line, that would be a huge economic boom of really epic proportions. So you're on board with that because you read this letter of mine and we queued up this interview. And I'm sorry if I got, a little loud and overheated during that. But what do you take? What's your take and what do you make of all of the above, Stephen?
Right. So I mean, I've been a small business owner for the last few years. And so I'm aware, first of all, I'm aware of challenges that any small business owner might face, right? You know, when it comes to even like healthcare costs in America, we don't really have a lot of things set up well for supporting small businesses. Um, a lot of people feel like government handouts are bad, but they don't realize that big business gets a lot of help from the government. And again, as you pointed out, far more business, I mean, most businesses in America are small businesses, and we might always need to think about how we calibrate the kind of help we give to various parts of our economy. If small businesses are such an important part of our economy, we should probably be giving more thought to supporting them better than we do right now, right? You mentioned so
Absolutely.
government contracts. I never actually got into government contracting. Somehow I got on the mailing list for the whatever it's called, the contract or contractor magazine for government contractors, because I was looking into it briefly, what it would take to actually be a government contractor. A friend of mine was actually working on Capitol Hill with Deloitte at the time, and he said, "Oh, they have this SBA liaison. You can talk to them about getting mentored by Deloitte." And I was like, "Great!" So I get on the phone with this lady, and I find out, well, they really want me to have 20 employees and $4 million in revenue before they talk to me about mentoring me to be a small business in the federal government, right? Which is fine. I got busy with other work and I didn't need to do that at that time. But when I'm thinking about how they're operating, I'm just wondering how many they're actually mentoring. And again, you mentioned maybe they're doing something behind the scenes where they're like there's not enough small businesses, so we're just going to do this work ourselves, you know.
That's what
Um,
that's a you really intuited something there based on your experience. They use every manner of obfuscation to declare every year, we met the goal, Bruce. We gave 23%. We gave 24, 25% of federal contracts went to small businesses. The SBA is responsible for this. How about a loan? They have branded the SBA in most people's minds as a source of loans. Well, they don't give loans. They back loans that a small business can get from banks. Okay. But we consider the SBA really a front organization for big businesses. And it's the invitation to you as a candidate is to, of all the things you have to consider, it's, I don't want to be presumptuous here. I totally respect the countless things you're juggling as you're going through your campaign. I love the chance to pour into your, plant the seed, like it's a scandal and an outrage, but it's also an opportunity to look very, very positively and optimistically is do everything that you can for our small businesses because they are really being slowly squeezed out of existence. For instance, the administration and the administrator of the SBA pounds their chest and brags about how all the great things they're doing for small businesses. Given that the SBA is the only agency whose exclusive mission is to protect and promote the interests of our small businesses, 98, 99% of all businesses in America, okay? It has always had one of the smallest budgets of every agency in Washington. It ought to have the biggest, given that we are a small business nation. Under this administration, the budget's been cut in half. The staff is going to shrink by half. And yet, it has been demonized for mismanaging some loans, like $600 million in loans, kind of casting it as kind of a corrupt and almost a useless agency. But shrinking to close the Department of Education, they have determined that the SBA is going to be given the $1.7 trillion student loan portfolio to manage with half the budget and half the staff. And we see it as a blatant move to set the SBA up to fail, to say, look, it can't handle what it's supposed to be doing. Let's push all of its functions into bigger agencies like Commerce or Treasury. And Stephen, lost in the fog of bureaucracy, we fear, will, if that happens, will be the contracting reality, the contracting program, the contracting provision whereby 23% of federal contracts are supposed to go to small businesses. People can go to our site, asbl.com. People can learn all about you at StephenHueyForCongress.com. What kind of final thoughts or observations do you have, Stephen?
I guess it was in the last few days that we had news about a lot of women being cut from the federal workforce, something like 300,000 in the last few months. So a lot of people know the old adage, you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket, right? We already saw in the Grapes of Wrath a long time ago the scary specter of just big corporate owned farms only. And if we had more players in the market, more smaller players, then it would be more resilient to failures in our economy, right? And so again, we don't want, like you mentioned, just men. Well, I mean, first of all, there's lots of women that are eager to work hard and to start things and run things. We shouldn't waste that opportunity in this country. I mean, a lot of countries don't give women the opportunities we are trying to give them, and it's something we shouldn't squander.
Absolutely. And we just think that political, economic, and political fairness for women will earn a candidate like you or any candidate a majority on election day, and also voters, if they understand that we are a small business nation and that Washington is supposed to steer $264 billion. That's if it goes up to 33% after we raise it from for women. There's billions of dollars in an infusion to create jobs and create value in our communities across the whole country if enough candidates and congressmen and just citizens lobby to expose the fraud that those small business contracts are not going to small businesses. That's the whole challenge, is to say that's unacceptable. And citizens and candidates and congressmen alike have this opportunity to transform our economy, because where it's going right now, it's so top heavy, it's such a balloon, it's such a bubble economically and financially in every way, shape, or form that there's a lot at stake. If we don't rectify this and address this, we can see a very, very dismal future where more and more power and money will be consolidated in fewer and fewer hands, and then they will really be able to dictate things to us that really verge on tyranny, that really, really verge on, real suppression and controls. And history teaches that's inevitable unless there's a big enough of a pushback from enough of the population. Now, your final thoughts about all that.
Yeah, well, we definitely need Congress to regain some of its oversight abilities. They've kind of given up some of it over the years, and we must shine a light and increase the transparency, not decrease it, because this is, these are taxpayer dollars, and if we can't clearly see where they're going and what they're being used for, the taxpayers are not being served. So hopefully we can do a better job also of kind of speaking to, educating the American people about what's actually happening behind the scenes and encouraging them to put more pressure on their representatives to ask for more accountability.
Absolutely. So thank you, Stephen Huey, Stephen Huey for Congress.com. I want to thank everybody for watching and listening today.